Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Prococo, and I'm the Director of Transfers, Refunds, and Enrollments at the MTRS. And I'm here today to present today's webinar on Retirement Plus, the special election for eligible MTRS members. So if you've received emails from us in the last few months, you all have one thing in common. You are part of the special election, and you have to make an election by June 30th, 2023. Today we have about 275 people that have registered, so we certainly appreciate you taking the time to attend today's webinar. And if you can't make it, or if you're late, we'll be posting these on the website or the video on the website as well as the slides, so you'll be able to reference it at any time. So with that being said, let's get started. We have a lot to cover today. So if we look at the election eligibility, so recent legislation, which is Chapter 134 of the Acts of 2022, which is the special R plus law, it allows eligible members a final one-time opportunity to elect to participate in Retirement Plus. So you are eligible if you look at number one, transferred into the MTRS from one of the other 103 Massachusetts public retirement systems between July 1st, 2001 and June 30th of 2022. So one thing I just wanted to mention about that is that your transfer has already happened. And some of the questions we received during the registrations are people asking if the transfer has to come over here. And at this point, the transfer has already come to the MTRS, so all of that service is over here. And then another important thing is that you had to become a member with the MTRS within that same window of time between July 1st, 2001 and June 30th of 2022. Number two, you were not part of the original R plus election, which happened in 2001. And that's because everyone prior to that window of time, listed in bullet number one, already received an opportunity to elect in Retirement Plus. So that group is not in the special election that is happening right now. Then number three, the person didn't submit an R plus election form prior to 12/31/2022, and that's because it was under the old process. So again, if you had a service transfer between July 1st of 01 and June 30th of 2022, you weren't part of the original R plus election in 2001, and we didn't receive a response from you within that window of time, you are part of the special election. So what do you need to do? So ultimately, you have to vote. It's really important that you view the materials that we've mailed and you make an informed decision by June 30th, 2023, because you are not currently in R+. So if you received a ballot in the mail, it means you are not currently in Retirement Plus, even if you are currently contributing at 11%. If a member does not respond during this election, they will not be enrolled in the R Plus program and they will not receive another chance to elect into Retirement Plus. If you're a retiring member, we will prioritize your case. So if you choose to elect into Retirement Plus and you do owe contributions, we will work to expedite your case. But in any event, you should respond to the ballot and you should respond by Friday, June 30th, 2023. Reminder ballots were just mailed out last Friday, March 31st. So some of you should have already received them in the mail. I think we've already received about 100 plus elections in the last day or so. So if you haven't received it yet, please look at your mail and you can see what the envelope looks like and what you can expect to see in the mail. So don't throw that out, it's not trash. So people don't generally understand what Retirement Plus is and why it's so important, and people don't understand really how the benefit plan works in the state of Massachusetts. So as a public employee, we have defined benefit retirement plans versus defined contribution plans. So what that means is that when we retire, Our benefit is based off of three factors. You have your age, your service, and a salary average. And that is used to compute what you'll receive for the rest of your life. So for example, you have a member and their salary average is $100,000 at the time of retirement. And with a maximum benefit of 80%, that's the most you can get, you'll receive an annual pension of $80,000 for the rest of your life, and that's guaranteed. So that's a defined benefit. And a defined contribution is you put money in a 401k, you retire, whatever money is in that account, that's what you have for the rest of your life. When it's done, it's done. With the state, with your defined benefit, you get that for the rest of your life. So why is R plus so important? So Retirement Plus essentially gets you to that 80% faster than a normal retirement would. So when you hit 30 years of service, you receive an additional 12% on top of what you would receive at a regular retirement benefit. And you can go to our website and we have retirement percentage charts, and we'll show you an example on the next page. But everyone's situation is different depending on when you started, your years of service, and when you plan on retiring. It really is different for every single person. But one thing that's important is that for Retirement Plus, someone has to be eligible for the benefit at the time of retirement, and they have to be considered participating, which is why this election is so important, because if you're part of this election, you're not currently participating unless you've made an election so far during this process. You are eligible for R Plus after 30 years of creditable service. 20 of those years have to be with the MTRS or Boston as a teacher, and then the other 10 can be from another retirement system or through a service purchase. And the contribution rate for Retirement Plus is a flat 11% on all of your gross earnings. So if we look at the percentage chart here, you can see the full chart online. But if you look at, we'll say age 55, and you go down to 30 years of service, you can see that with a regular retirement, you would receive 45% of your salary average versus 57% with R plus. So again, if we use that $100,000 example, that's a $45,000 benefit a year for the rest of your life versus $57,000 a year with Retirement Plus. And then that's where that 12% increase kicks in. Then you can see every year after that, 31 years, it increases to 14% higher than a regular retirement. Then after 32 years, it's 16% higher than a regular retirement. So you can really see where Retirement Plus helps you get to that 80% faster than a regular retirement. So people wonder, how is that funded? You know, you get $80,000 a year for the rest of your life in that example. How do you receive that guaranteed for the rest of your life? So the funding from the benefit comes from three sources. You have your employee contributions. So each month, your school district withholds contributions that are sent to the retirement system. When you retire, you'll receive a certain portion of that as part of your benefit. Then two, we have state contributions. So the Commonwealth supplies funds for employee benefits to help fund the system and fund these retirement benefits. And then we have investment earnings that are invested through PRIM, which we are very fortunate because we have one of the top investment firms in the country. So we are very lucky to have PRIM. So when we look at the member contribution rates, you can see that it is complicated in the state of Massachusetts, but that's why we're here to break it down and make sense of this. So if you look at the middle column for not participating in Retirement Plus, and then we go all the way down to the bottom, we'll start down at the bottom and work our way up. If you became a member before January 1st of 1975, you established public membership in a retirement system, your contribution rate should have been 5%. And then through the years, there would be pension reforms, and then the rates would increase over time. So if you establish public service between January 1st of 75 through December 31st of 78, you would be grandfathered in at a flat 7% of all of your earnings. So one thing that's important to note here is that if you're grandfathered in at the 5%, your rate doesn't increase as you hit those newer period of times. You will always be at the 5%. So if you started in that 7% time period, your rate will be 7 your entire membership. So if we work our way up for people that start between January 1st of 79 through December 31st of 83, that person's rate would be 7% on all gross earnings, plus an additional 2% taken on earnings over $30,000 a year. And this is where things get complicated in the state of Massachusetts when it comes to contribution rates, that additional plus 2%. Then we go up to January 1st of 84 through June 30th of 96. People establishing membership in that period would have a rate of 8% plus an additional 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year, that same plus 2 amount. Then we have members that start between July 1st of 96 through June 30th of 2001 have a rate of 9% plus an additional 2% on earnings over $30,000. This rate right here is commonly referred to as 9 plus 2 because it's the 9 and the additional 2%. And we will break that down a little bit later on in the presentation, but that seems to be a big source of confusion when it comes to contribution rates in the state. Then in 2001, something interesting happened. The law passed to give members a chance to participate in Retirement Plus. And you can see over on the right side that rate of 11% there. So if you started it with the MTRS or the Boston Retirement System on or after July 1st of 2001, your rate is 11%. You are mandated into Retirement Plus because that is when you started in the system and that is what your rate should be. If you started in a system other than the MTRS or Boston, your rate would have been just like it was in 96 or 2001. It would have been that 9 plus 2 contribution rate. So I started in the system when in 2007. So my contribution rate, because I'm a member of the state retirement board, my rate is 9 plus an additional 2% over $30,000. But then when it comes to members who start on or after July 1st of 2001 with the MTRS, if they've had 11% taken, but they have funds in another retirement board, they're grandfathered in at having that rate or having the opportunity to keep that lower rate because they established it at the other board. And then that's where this election comes into play, because you have a choice to either be in at 11% with Retirement Plus, or you could keep your lower rate that you established at the other retirement system. Then in 2012, we had another pension reform, and people who started in a mass retirement system other than the MTRS or Boston would contribute at the 9 plus 2 rate. However, after 30 years of service, that the regular contribution rate would decrease by 3%. So after 30 years, it would be 6% plus an additional 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year. And same with the MTRS or Boston. If you start on or after April 2nd, 2012, you'll be mandated into Retirement Plus. However, after 30 years of service, your contribution rate will drop to a flat 8% with no additional 2%. So now we'll discuss the difference between the 11 and the 9 plus 2. And this is the big source of confusion when it comes to contribution rates, but we're here today to clear that up so you can have a better understanding of the rates and what is Retirement Plus, what's not Retirement Plus. So as I discussed on the previous slide, the rate for R plus is a flat 11% on all gross earnings. The other lower rate, the 9% on all gross earnings, with an additional 2% taken on earnings over $30,000 a year, is that lower 9 plus 2 rate. So people say 9 plus 2, they hear the word plus, they think it's retirement plus or the plus, or they see or hear 9 and 2 and think it's, because there's that additional contribution, they think that, they think they have an enhanced benefit because it's something extra. However, it's not. It's not retirement plus and not the rate for the enhanced benefit. So 9 plus 2 does not equal 11% for R plus. And in the Mass Public Pension System, 9 plus 2 does not equal 11. The monetary difference between the two rates is $600 per year. That is just the way the math works out. No matter what you make, it'll always be $600 per year if you're making over $30,000 a year. So again, even if you have been contributing at the rate for Retirement Plus at 11% the entire time, it means you are not currently in Retirement Plus because you are part of this election. And one of the reasons for that is because if you started in a system after 7/1/2001, the school district and the MTRS might not know that you've had funds at another retirement board. So the school will take 11% because they think you're brand new to our system. And then years down the road, we'll find out that you had previous service. And this is when you'd have the opportunity to elect to either keep the 11% or go down to your lower contribution rate. So again, if you've been at 11% for a number of years, a lot of people wonder why they have this opportunity now. And this is why. It's because we didn't receive a response after we received your transfer, and we need to make you need to make a response during this election period. So we'll go over an example. We have Joe Teacher. So Joe Teacher recently transferred into the MTRS from another mass contributory system. He has an annual salary of $58,000 and is paid over 26 pays. So if you look over to the left side at a flat 11% contribution rate, his biweekly contribution would be $245.38, and that's with Retirement Plus. Then if you look over to the right side, you have the 9 plus 2 contribution rate. So if you look at his biweekly, the 2230.77, and you take 9% of that amount, it's $200.77. And then there's the additional 2% contribution on earnings over $30,000, and that equals to $21.54. And we'll go over how we calculate that $21.54 in the next slide. But this is just to illustrate that when you add the regular contribution to that 2% contribution, you can see it equals $222.31. That's the total 9 plus 2. And you can see that it's lower than the rate for Retirement Plus. So for one pay period, you can see the difference there is $23.07. And when you multiply that by 26 pays, the difference is $600. So you can try this with any salary amount, grab a calculator, and you'll see that the difference will be $600. So how is that additional plus 2% earnings on over $30,000 per year calculated? So per PERAC, we have to calculate the additional 2% on a per pay period basis. So a lot of people like to take the annual salary, subtract it by 30,000, and then whatever dollar amount that is, they multiply that by 2% and think that that might be the total 2% that is owed. In a lot of cases, that would work, but in situations where someone might start mid-year, they might not make over $30,000 a year. So it's important that it's done on a per pay period basis to prorate what it would be on a full-time basis. So if you look at this chart right here and you look at $30,000 over to the right. So if you have someone that made exactly $30,000 a year and you divide that by 26 pays, that person's biweekly payment would be $1153.85. So again, if someone makes $30,000 a year, that is what their pay would be, $1153.85. Anything over that amount is subject to the additional 2%, because as they make more money, any money that's over that 1153.85 would be subject to that 2%. So in Joe's case, his biweekly is 2230.77. So that 1076.92 is above or in addition to that 1153.85 and subject to the additional 2%. So if you take 2% on that amount, you get the 2154, and that is how you calculate that additional 2% contribution. So I know we just covered a lot of information, so we'll take a break and ask questions in case you have any. I have Scott Olson, our Director of Communications, ready to share our questions.
Great. Hey, Dave. We do have one question, and it's a good one, and I'm sure everyone is interested in it. And it goes like this. If I sign up for Retirement Plus and I don't make 30 years, will any of the money be reimbursed?
Great question. So yes, if you decide to participate in Retirement Plus and you do not meet that 30-year requirement at the time of retirement, you will get a refund of the additional contributions that you've made for Retirement Plus.
Great. Thank you. That's all the questions we have for now.
Okay, great. Okay, so checking your R Plus status in MyTRS. So MyTRS is our online portal that we have for members. If you go to our website, you can create an account and log in. Once you log in, to the left, you'll see a section that says Retirement Account from the homepage. If you click on that and then you click on MTRS Membership and Account Summary, there'll be a pop-up. You'll have to download it, but it'll give you a summary of your account. And if you look at your contribution rate, you can see down there it says 9% plus 2% on earnings over 30,000. And you can also see that this person is not participating in Retirement Plus. So this isn't necessarily the contributions that you have being withheld from your paycheck. This is the status that we have in our system and what your rate should be. So you can check that at any time on MyTRS. Now checking your contribution rate on your pay stub, this becomes a little tricky. So you can look at your pay and calculate what is being withheld from your paycheck. On this slide, we have contributions of 11%. So if you look at the first screenshot there, there's $1,414.86. You can see there's a code there. It says MSTR11, and then the contribution amount is $155.63. And then we go over to the next screenshot. You can see $2276.81, and then the code is SCH 11%, and then it's $250.45. Then down below, you can see that it's $3,335, and the code is 11% SC RET 367.69. So this is how you can see that 11% is being withheld. It should be a flat 11% from that gross amount. And another thing you can see from this slide is that there are different codes depending on your school district's payroll software. So it's different everywhere. Sometimes it can be difficult to find these codes or to find the amount, but at least after today, hopefully you should have an idea of where to find your retirement contributions when you look at your pay. Now for the lower 9+2 rate, a lot of the members, part of the selection would be 9+2, that lower rate. If you look at the screenshot to the left, you can see the first code is PMTRB, and it's 359.71. And then down below to the left, it's QMTRB2 with 5686 as the contribution. So you can see there's two contributions there, and that is the 9+2. It's the lower contribution rate. Then in the next one, you can see it's 2376.23. You have STCH 9% with 213.86 being withheld, and then S add 2%, 24.45. And then there are also some cases that aren't so straightforward, where the regular and 2% contributions are lumped into one single deduction on your pay. So if you look down below, you can see TPN 9 and 2, and it's 624.94. So if you back into the rate, you take that contribution and you divide it by the gross earnings, it equals 10.58%. And after looking at those charts that or the percentage grid that we went over earlier, you now know that 10.58 isn't one of the rates that is available to public employees in the state of Massachusetts. So if you look at a breakdown of the contributions, 531.77 is what the regular contribution would be, and then 93.17 is what the additional 2% contribution would be, and that equals 624.94 for that total deduction. So again, you can see that all the codes are different. It's complicated. You can see where someone would get confused and think they're in Retirement Plus because there's that additional 2% being withheld, but that is not Retirement Plus, and that is the lower rate. Does anyone have any questions about the rates and your R Plus status?
Oh, yes, Dave, we do have a few questions coming in. First one is, I thought I was already signed up for Retirement Plus. How do I find out if I need to elect for it?
Okay, so if you are part of the special election and you received a ballot in the mail, you are part of this election, even if you already thought you were in Retirement Plus. Because if you had 11% taken, or you could even have the lower 9+2 rate taken, you might already think that you're in Retirement Plus. However, if you're part of this election, you have to submit a ballot or an election by Friday, June 30th, 2023, or else you won't be participating in Retirement Plus. So it's important that you respond and make an election. We did send lists to every single school district across the state for all eligible members that haven't elected yet. So hopefully they've reached out to you to let you know that you're part of this election, in addition to all the emails that we've sent out and ballots and letters that we've sent out in the past. But it is very important that you respond.
Great, thanks, Dave. Next question. Could you speak more about what happens if I don't get 30 years? I started teaching a bit older. You mentioned a buy-in option for reaching 30 years. Could you say more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So part of the eligibility requirement for Retirement Plus is that you have to have at least 30 years of service. 20 have to be with the MTRS, and 10 can be from other public service in the state or through a service purchase. And I think that that's the part you're referring to as the service purchase. So if you worked in the public but weren't eligible for a retirement system, you could buy back time and add it to your years of service. So for example, when I was 14 years old, I worked at a library. I only worked about 7, 8 hours a week. And because I worked so little hours, I wasn't eligible for a retirement system, but it was still public service. So when I got this job here and I was eligible for a retirement system, I could buy that time back and add it to my years. So a common case for teachers is that if you were ever a day-to-day sub prior to teaching, or if you had a break between teaching jobs and you subbed, you might be able to buy that time back if the service was rendered in a public school. So that's the kind of time that you can buy back. I know that there are other cases where people may have been a lifeguard over the summer, or worked for a recreational department during the summer and they want to buy that time back, they would have to apply to buy that. And if eligible, you could purchase it and add that to your years.
Great. Next question. Is there any benefit to R plus if I don't make the 30 years?
Any benefit to R plus if you don't make the 30 years? So I would say no, just because you wouldn't be eligible for that enhanced benefit. Um, so you would retire with a regular retirement. Same as any other public employee in the state of Mass. You know, someday when I retire, I'll have a regular retirement. It's just that you wouldn't be able to get to that 80% faster like you would with Retirement Plus.
Great. Next question. Do I need to pay back $600 for each year that I have not been in R plus when I sign up? And there's a follow-up question. Do I need to pay it all at once?
Okay, great questions. We will cover that later on in the presentation, so I won't get too deep into it right now. Um, but yes, you'll have to pay it back, and we'll discuss it more in detail later on.
Great. Next question. If my retirement plus status is quote unquote participating and my contribution rate is 11%, do I need to do anything?
Great question. So yes and no. So as of right now, I think we've had almost 17 or 1800 people that have elected. And we have to manually go into our system and change your R plus status to show that you're in Retirement Plus if that's what you elected during this process. So if you are part of the special election and you log into my TRS and see that you're participating, then it means we've changed your rate in the system. If you're currently contributing at 11%, you've checked your paycheck, um, one of two things can happen. One, you might be all set. You might have been at 11% the entire time you've been a member of the MTRS, or you could just be at 11% now, and there could be a time period in the past where you were not at the rate of 11%. So we would have to go back and calculate what you would owe to the system. So like I said, we have about 1,700 people that have elected so far. We're preparing for our first round of notifications to all members that have made an election thus far. We hope to get that out within the next week or two. So you should see something. If there is a rate change or if you owe money, we will let you know as part of that process.
Great. Last question for now. So I would have to be contributing in Retirement Plus at 11% for 30 years, not teaching for 30 years.
Not necessarily. So it would be all of your MTRS service that you contributed at a flat 11%. So let's say you were a para for 10 years and you contributed at your local retirement system, that you would have contributed at the lower rate at your previous retirement system. Then becoming eligible for the MTRS, you have to be contributing at 11% for at least 20 years after that point. So let's say you did retire after 30 years of service, 20 would have been contributing at the 11, and then 10 would have been at the lower rate. And then same if you worked, 25 years as part of the MTRS, then it would be 25 years at the higher rate and then 10 years at the lower rate. So not necessarily all 30 years, but just your MTRS or Boston service as a teacher.
Great, thanks. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, great. Okay, so how should you decide whether or not to participate in Retirement Plus? So I guess you have to ask yourself, will you work long enough to meet the requirements for R Plus? And we just talked about it during the Q&A section, but you have to have at least 30 years of total creditable service, and 20 has to be as a member of the MTRS or Boston as a teacher in order to be eligible. And then the other 10 can be from the other retirement board or through that service purchase that you would have your previous public service. So will you work long enough to meet the requirements? So if no, you'll not be eligible for the R Plus Enhanced benefit. So you may want to elect to opt out. The choice is completely up to you. We realize that it may be a tough choice for some people because we can't predict the future. We don't know how long we're going to work. I had a teacher that she elected into R Plus back during the original election in 2001, and I think she ended up working like 50 years. And in that scenario, she would have hit 80% anyways without R Plus. So she actually worked too much and it didn't benefit her. And she didn't get a refund of her contributions because she elected in, and she ended up getting 11% anyways. But if you know for sure that you're not going to meet that service requirement, then no is probably going to be what you want to elect. And if yes, if you do think you're going to work long enough, first you should look and see if if it is really worth it for you. You should look at the percentage charts. We showed the example earlier, and on the slide, you can go to our website and view charts for both Tier 1 and Tier 2. Just because, like I said before, everyone's situation is different. So you should try to estimate how many years of service and how old you'll be at the time of retirement and kind of compare where you'd be with Retirement Plus versus that regular retirement benefit. And then the $1 million question is trying to figure out how much it's going to cost to be in Retirement Plus. And we have an R Plus decision tree that should help making that decision or determining how much you would owe to be in Retirement Plus. So if you go to the homepage of our website, we have our R Plus Resource Center. Right on the homepage, that's the direct link right there. And that is a screenshot of what our decision tree looks like. You can see there's 3 tabs at the top, and we're going to go through each tab to go through each situation. So you can see here, so, if you've been at a flat 11% the whole time, your whole MTRS membership, you're not going to owe any additional money and you're going to continue to contribute at a flat 11% for Retirement Plus until you retire. Then you have people that are at 9+2, that lower rate. So if you elect to participate, your contributions will increase to a flat 11%, and the retroactive cost will be that $600 a year for each year of MTRS service. So this makes it a little bit easier trying to calculate how much you might owe, because that $600 is going to stay the same no matter how much money you made, as long as it's over $30,000 a year. But the trick is trying to figure out how long you may have contributed at the lower rate versus 11%. And while I wish we could do estimates for everyone, but it's just not possible with the volume of people that we have as part of this election. We have almost 8,000 people, with only a handful of people to administer this process. So this is why we have this decision tree. So a few examples here: if you have 5 years of prior MTRS service, at the most you would owe $3,000 because it's $600 at 5 years. If it's 10 years, it would be $6,000 because 600 times 10 is 6,000. In 15 years, you would owe $9,000. So throughout this process, throughout the years, members they may have had rate changes throughout the years, and that's because we were operating under the old transfer process where if you didn't respond, you weren't in Retirement Plus. So we requested a rate change and we may have refunded you in the past. And we did that because we were operating under the way the law used to be written. So if you're part of the special election now, you might have an idea of how much you would owe based off of how long you've been at the lower rate. So you'd have to go back and see when we requested a rate change and if we issued a refund or not. So prior to 2017, we were issuing refunds as part of this process because people over contributed. We wanted to give people their contributions back. So you'd be able to figure out if you'd owe that refund plus the number of years that you've been at the lower rate. Then in 2017, we stopped issuing refunds because We try to get this law changed to try to give members another one-time chance to elect into Retirement Plus. And we didn't want to refund people if we had the feeling there would be another chance to elect into this program. So then we wouldn't have to then bill you for the refund that we would have issued. So hopefully after that, you can have a better idea of how much money you would owe back for Retirement Plus if you're a 9+2 member. Then the 8+2 gets a little bit more complicated. It's not that simple $600 a year like it was for the 9+2 members. However, you can see here on this grid that if you make $40,000 a year on average, then the amount you would owe is about $1,000 a year. And you can see with every $10,000 increase in that average, the amount owed goes up by $100. So between 40 and 50,000, the difference is 1,000 and 1,100. Then you can see when you go up to 60,000, it's 1,200 versus the 1,100. So you can see down below, Sarah Teacher has 10 years of prior service. The average was $70,000, and her retroactive cost would be about $13,000. That 1,300 times 10 years. So again, it's different for everyone. Everyone's case is different. For 8+2 members, I have seen invoices as much as $28,000, $30,000, I think at the most. And some people are happy to have the opportunity. They don't blink an eye at wanting to be in Retirement Plus. I could tell you that if I owe 30 grand, I probably couldn't do it, but there are some people out there that could. Do people have any questions about how to calculate that cost and what you might owe to the system?
Hi, Dave. We do have a couple of questions, not specifically about that, but the first one is, how do I get a ballot if I have not received one in the mail?
Okay, great question. So on Friday, our vendor, Yes Elections, mailed out reminder ballots to everyone that's part of the election. The first election that went out, I believe it was mailed out on January 11th. Um, so chances are you probably don't have that ballot. But if you haven't received a ballot in the mail, you should receive it any day now because they were mailed out last Friday. So be on the lookout for that. And if you don't see it within the next week or so, you can email us and we will request a replacement to give to you.
Great, thanks, Dave. Next one for now is, how do you go about applying for additional time? For example, the subbing or lifeguarding that you mentioned. How can
Oh,
you see how much total time you have accrued?
sure. So if you go to our website, there is a section, I believe it's called Forms. And as an active member, there are a bunch of different applications that you can fill out for the different types of public service you may have had in the state of Massachusetts. So if you go to our website, you can find them on there. You would have to first apply to see if you'd be eligible to buy that service. And once determined by our staff here, we would mail you out an invoice for that period of time. And then seeing the number of years of service that you have. If you go onto MSS or MyTRS, our member self-service portal, I believe that there's a creditable service report that you can run and you can receive an estimate of what your service credit would be in the system.
Great. One more question for now. In the example you gave of the teacher who taught for 50 years, why didn't she get a refund?
That's a good question. And I felt bad for her because she ended up working so long. It's just because when she retired, she met the requirements for R plus. She met that 30-year service requirement. You only get the refund back if you don't meet the service requirements for R plus. So when she was younger, she probably figured that as an insurance policy, she would get Retirement Plus, or thought that she would never last to make it, to 80% at a regular retirement. But I think she ended up just loving teaching so much that she just stayed way longer than she expected, and she got her 80%, but unfortunately couldn't get the contributions back.
Great, thanks. That's all for now.
Okay. Okay, so I mentioned this a little earlier. So previous rate changes and refunds from the MTRS. So we would have requested a rate change if we saw that you hadn't responded to your original election opportunity after we received a transfer, and which defaulted you out of this enhanced benefit for R+. So again, it's important to know that any decision that was made in the past was done under the prior law and our previous regulation that was in effect at the time when the decision was made. Um, so it's important to know that if you were in the situation and we did issue a refund, you would owe the contributions back to make your account whole. So how many years to owe back for the retroactive cost? And we covered this on the decision tree, but it is going to vary between each member. So it is hard for us to figure out for every single member part of this election who would owe money, who wouldn't owe money. But it's important to know that you'll owe the money back to when you became a member of the MTRS. So if we didn't issue a refund as part of that rate change, then you may only owe back to when we requested for the rate to be changed. So for example, if we requested for the rate to be changed in February 2016 and you're still contributing at that lower rate, you might owe about 4,200 through February of 23 because you had that $600 a year times 7 years of being at that lower rate. So as I said before, we have about 8,000 people part of this election. So it's not possible for us to do estimates for every single member, which is why that we did our best to put those examples together on the decision tree to try to help make that decision. So we have a couple examples. Scenario one, my good friend Paul Murray established public membership as a librarian at the age of 23 on July 1st, 2010, and contributed to his local retirement system. So because it was at the local retirement system and he started within that time period, his rate is 9+2. That lower 9% with 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year. On September 1st, 2015, at age 28, he became a school librarian and a member of the MTRS, contributing at 11%. The MTRS received his transfer on 7/1/2017, and he didn't respond to his election notices. So in case you didn't know, as part of the older process, once we received a transfer, we mailed out 3 letters within 180 days to ask you if you wanted to participate in Retirement Plus. And if we didn't receive a response to those elections, then it counted as a no election and you were out of Retirement Plus. So in this scenario, Paul didn't respond to his election notices and he was out. In January 2018, the MTRS requested his school district switch his rate to the lower 9+2 rate. Paul is now part of the special election and must make an election prior to 6/30 of 2023. Does R plus make sense for Paul? Let's take a look. Yes, R plus makes sense for Paul because he can reach the service requirements when he does retire. If he doesn't, he'll receive a refund of those excess contributions. So Paul has 5 years with his other retirement system, and he'll have 30 years of total service at the age of 53. Paul meets and exceeds the 20-year MTRS service requirement at that point. At age 58, Paul will receive the maximum benefit of 80% versus receiving a regular retirement at 63%. So if you look at the retirement percentage chart here, you can see the difference between 30 years of service at 53 and 35 years of service at the age of 58. So if you look at that first red box at 53 with 30 years, a regular retirement would give them 39%. So if we use that $100,000 salary average, That's a $39,000 annual pension. And with R Plus, he would get $51,000 a year for his guaranteed benefit. So you can see where Retirement Plus really can help people get that higher percentage at a younger age. Then at age 58, you can see with 35 years of service, Paul would reach 80% with Retirement Plus, where a regular retirement would get 63%. So my friend Paul's gonna retire, play golf, enjoy his life at 80%, and I'll be at 63%, just working a little bit longer to get to that 80%, which isn't the end of the world because a guaranteed benefit for the rest of your life is still good. So I don't want to make it seem like a regular retirement is bad. It is still very good, and I am fortunate to have that as a public employee in Massachusetts. We have scenario 2 now. Mary Educator, who established public service at the age of 23 as a paraprofessional on September 1st, 1993, and contributed to her local retirement system. So because Mary started prior to 96, her rate is that 8 plus 2. So it's even lower than the 9 plus 2 rate. So that's 8% on all gross earnings with 2% on earnings over $30,000 a year. On September 1st of 13, at the age of 43, she became a teacher and a member of the MTRS, contributing at 11%. And the reason why she contributed at 11% is because when someone first becomes a member, the MTRS or the school district might not know if service has been established at another retirement system. And we don't find out until that transfer comes to the MTRS. So some people might be wondering, well, Mary's 43, why is she contributing at 11 if she started in 93? And that is why. So the MTRS received her transfer on 7/1/2016, and she did not respond to her election notices, the 3 election notices that we sent out in the mail. In January of 17, the MTRS requests that her school district switch her rate to 8 plus 2, her lower contribution rate. Mary is now part of the special election and must make an election prior to 6/30 of 2023. Does R plus make sense for Mary? No, R plus doesn't make sense for Mary. Mary would need to work until the age of 63 to fulfill the 20-year MTRS service requirement. So you can see that she would have 40 years of service, 20 would be with her local system and 20 with the MTRS, and she would have already achieved the maximum benefit of 80% when she hits the age of 40. So in this case, she would get 80% for a benefit, that $80,000, while contributing that lower 8 plus 2 rate, because that 11 isn't going to benefit her in this situation. So as I said earlier, this election is underway. We are officially a little bit past the midway point of this election. The original ballots were mailed out on January 11th by Yes Elections, who is our processing vendor. Eligible members can vote online. You can use a unique code and a PIN that was printed on the ballot to make that election online, or you could mail it in using the prepaid envelope to Yes Elections. You don't want to, if you're going to send it in via mail, you shouldn't send it in directly to the MTRS. You shouldn't give it to your payroll officer. It should not go back to either us or the school. It should be mailed to the vendor or done online. So as I said earlier, the second packet was mailed back on Friday, this past Friday, March 31st, to anyone who is eligible to participate and hadn't made an election as of March 24th, 2023. So it's important that you look for those ballots in the mail. I showed an example of what that envelope looks like earlier in the presentation. If you want to go back and look at it, you can do that and see what to expect in the mail. If you don't receive that ballot by Monday, April 10th, then you can email RetirementPlus at www.state.ma.us and request another ballot, and we will get back to you. So as I said it before, I can't express it enough that this election ends Friday, June 30th, 2023. Online votes must be submitted by midnight on June 30th, and paper ballots have to be postmarked by June 30th, 2023. If for some reason you get sick the week before the election and you cannot make an election on time, or if you're out on a leave, there is no provision in the law that allows an extension for this opportunity. So you have to make this election by Friday, June 30th, 2023. It is very important that you get it in by that date. If it's submitted on July 1st, 2023, then the election is not going to count and you will miss out on participating in Retirement Plus. Even if you don't want to participate in Retirement Plus, you know that it's not going to make sense. It is still beneficial for you to submit your election, because then we will know that that is exactly what you want to do and that you don't want to be in Retirement Plus. Because I would imagine that after this election period, we're going to have some members that don't respond just because they're not paying attention to the materials that we send out. And unfortunately, those members are going to be out of luck. So that is why I really appreciate the people attending this webinar today, because it shows that you're interested and you're taking the time to learn about this to make an informed decision. So again, by Friday, June 30th, 2023, we need that election. So post-election steps. So if you've elected to participate in R Plus and you've always been at 11%, we'll send you a confirmation email that lets you know that we received your election to participate and that you don't owe any money. If you've elected to participate in R Plus and have not paid 11% during part or all of your service, we'll send an invoice with installment options for amounts over $1,000. And I believe we're going to get into the details more on payment plans in the next few slides. If you elect to opt out of R Plus and have paid 11% during any of your MTRS service, you'll receive a refund of any of the excess contributions that you've paid in at the 11%. And one thing I want to say about this is, the rates can be confusing. People think that 9+2 is Retirement Plus, and you now know that it's not. And over the years, members have been at 9+2, and when they choose not to be in Retirement Plus, they think they're getting a refund of those additional 2% contributions. And that's not the case, because that is just their rate. They don't get the additional 2%. That's just what has to be made to the system. It's the difference between that 11 and the 9+2 or the lower rates that you would receive the excess refund for. So we'll communicate the rate changes to your school districts and CC you on those emails. Please don't ask your HR or payroll officer to make any changes to your rate. We will send the rate changes. And as I mentioned before, this is a big project. So far, we have about 1,700 people, and we're going to have to send communications for specific scenarios to all these people or to anyone that has elected. So we're just about ready to send that communication out, and it should go out within the next week or two. So invoices and payment methods, how can you pay? So the MTRS will invoice you once we confirm your rate has been changed. So if you're not currently at the 11%, you choose to participate, we can't calculate what you would owe to the system until we can see that contribution posted to your account. And by posted, I mean your school has submitted their monthly report, there are no errors, and that money gets added to your MTRS account. One important thing, and people often ask, is there interest on these invoices? How far back does the interest go? And that interest doesn't start for the first 90 days. So we send out the invoice and you have 90 days to pay off the amount interest free. And then after the 90 days, we charge what we call buyback interest. And that is half of what the actuarial interest is for the system. The current actuarial interest is 7%, so we would charge 3.5% on that invoice, and that would start to, the invoice would start to tick after 90 days. Unfortunately, the balances can't be paid back via paycheck deductions. That's a question we get a lot. A lot of members ask if they can pay through their checks. Unfortunately, you can't. Balances must be paid in full prior to retirement. That is very important. So our member services staff can calculate what that R plus benefit would be with your account whole, meaning that we have all the contributions in your account to be able to pay you that lifetime benefit. So when we look at the payment methods, you can pay in full with a personal check if you have the money. If the amount is over $1,000, you can enter into a 5-year installment plan. So what you would have to do is on the invoice, we would let you know what that first installment would be. You would have to make that first installment within that first 90 days. And then every year after that, you would just have to pay that same installment amount. And then that would get you into the installment plan. And then unfortunately, we don't accept credit cards or debit cards. You can't pay via that method. One important thing to know is that you may be able to roll money over from a qualified retirement plan. So if you've contributed to another pre-tax type account, a 403b, you might be able to roll money over from that account in order to pay for this invoice. So if you have one, great. If you don't, um, you still have time to set one up because we have a lot of cases that we have to work through. And if you start now, you might be able to save for the next 6 months, a year until we're able to get those invoices out. Some people we might be able to invoice right away because um, you're already at 11 and we just need to calculate what the difference is from the past. And then others, if you're not at 11%, it all depends on how far behind your district is with reporting contributions to the system. So now we'll cover the R Plus resources that we have for both employers and members on our website. So as I mentioned earlier, if you go to our website, mass.gov/MTRS, and you click on the R Plus Resource Center, we have a lot of great information on this website. Our communications team built this from the ground up at the beginning of the special election to be able to provide all of this information on Retirement Plus on our website. We have a special election video on there. There was a webinar back on February 23rd that we had from members that's on there. This webinar will be posted on that website. We have all the decision information, that decision tree that we went over earlier, all of the eligibility requirements, the benefits and the costs, detailed contribution rate information that you can find on our website. And as mentioned before, if you need a replacement ballot, wait until Monday, April 10th, because you should receive it any day now. If you don't receive it by then, just send us an email and we will request for you to get another ballot. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us. So important items from today. I know we covered a lot of information, but just to kind of recap, everyone who received a special election packet is not currently in Retirement Plus. So it means that there's some action needed. You have to respond and you have to make an election. Even if you're already at 11% and you think you're in Retirement Plus, if you've received the ballot, you have to fill it out and submit your election. You're not in Retirement Plus if you're receiving this ballot. If you don't respond to the election, you will not be in Retirement Plus. This is your last chance. And again, if you know that you don't want to be in Retirement Plus, it's still worthwhile to submit your election, because if you're at the 11%, we'll get your rate changed sooner rather than later, and then you won't have to wait until some point after the election. The election window closes on Friday, June 30th, 2023. And again, those elections, if received online, have to be done by midnight on Friday, June 30th, or postmarked by June 30th, 2023. So again, there's no special provision to allow extensions on this deadline. Someone gets sick, if you go to the hospital, we can't allow you to make the election after this date. You have to make it before Friday, June 30th, 2023. Again, there are R Plus Resource Center. You can go there for all this information, and you can email us at retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us for any questions that you have related to this election. So do people have any questions? I know that was a lot of information that we covered, so I'm happy to answer any more questions if anyone has any.
Yes, Dave, we do have some more questions. We've gone a little over on time, but we do have some great questions here, so we'll get to them. The first one is, if you have 15 years in the system and 2 years out of the 15 years was purchased from another Massachusetts retirement system, when you're calculating your R plus balance, do you multiply 600 times 15 or 600 times 13?
Great question, and I'm glad you brought that up. It would only be on the MTRS service. You would only do it on that 15 and not the 2 from the service that you purchased. So any service purchase that you have, you don't calculate the difference on that, or any prior service at your previous retirement system, you wouldn't owe the difference in contributions from that service, only the period of time that you were with the MTRS or Boston.
Great. If I opted into R plus, when will retro payments start?
Another good question, and that will all depend on um, if you're currently contributing at 11%, if you're not contributing at 11%. If you're already at 11% and you elect to participate, then you'll probably be in the first group of members that get invoices, because we have a definitive amount to calculate. And when that'll start happening, I would imagine probably between July and December, we would start doing that, because first we have to wait for this election process to be over. Everyone that's not in Retirement Plus, we're going to have to request for their rates to be changed to 11%. I mean, I'm sorry, the lower rate, the 9+2, not 11, because if they don't respond, they're out of Retirement Plus. And then at that point, we'll look and see who's already at 11, who owes money, and then we'll start issuing invoices. So it could be within the next, I want to say, 6 to 8 months.
Great. Next question. Can you pay in increments, or do you need to pay all at once to buy back years?
So if you enter into the installment plan, you pay in those equal increments. It has to be that that installment amount that we send to you. It has to be. It can't be lower than that amount. If you want to pay more than that, I believe that's fine. Your amount would just be recalculated. But if it is over $1,000, you have to enter into the 5-year installment. If it's under $1,000, you can't make multiple payments. It just has to be that whole amount. Or I guess if it is a lower amount, then interest would start to accrue on whatever the balance is of what's remaining from what the original invoice would be.
Great. One more question. If I opt into R plus, but then when I get the invoice and it's more than I can pay, can I cancel?
So unfortunately, you can't cancel, because this is a one-time opportunity and the election is irrevocable. So a couple things could happen. If you don't want to pay because it's too much, what'll happen is once we send out the invoice, interest will start to accrue on the amount that we send out. If you make it to retirement and you meet the requirements for R plus, you meet the 30-year requirement, 20 with MTRS, 20 with the school, interest will accrue on that amount all the way up until the time you retire. And as part of the retirement process, we would see that we already invoiced you, and we'd have to send an updated invoice with interest on that. And you would have to pay that before we could retire you, because you would be receiving the enhanced benefit. If you didn't make the requirements for R plus, you didn't make the 30 years, um, then I guess you wouldn't have to pay that. You wouldn't pay that amount back. And then at retirement, any other contributions that you made at Retirement Plus, I guess from now going forward to the time of your retirement, we would refund that difference to you, because you wouldn't meet the service requirement.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. We do have more activity going on in the live chat, but our representatives are handling that. That's all the published questions I have for now.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks everyone for attending today. I truly appreciate it. I know, taking time out of your afternoon after spending a long day with kids, I'm sure you're all tired. So it's certainly much appreciated, joining this webinar today, and I apologize we've gone over. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, retirementplus@trb.state.ma.us, and we will be happy to help you. Best of luck making your decision, and take care.